All right, so we're here today with Amy Surdam, who's a candidate for Cheyenne Mayor. Welcome, Amy. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor of the Wyoming Tribune Eagle.
I'm Sharon Payne with Black Hills Energy.
Bob Fact, Cheyenne Animal Shelter.
Again, welcome, Amy. Thanks.
Nice to see you
Thanks
all.
for being here. Thanks for running for mayor. Appreciate your interest in the position. What specific issues or concerns caused you to run for mayor this year?
You know, I love Cheyenne and I really want to be a part of the processes involved with making decisions in the community. I actually do want to run or organize the budget and have a bigger role in that. I really want to help the city staff be more flexible and creative and efficient. I want to keep our community safe. And I love this community so much, and I really want to make our community as great as the people who live here. So it's not so much issues, but just wanting to contribute to a better positive quality of life and a more positive community for our family and our citizens.
Great. What qualifications do you bring to the table that will help you become a good mayor?
So I'm an executive in the military and in the public sector and in the private sector. I've owned actually more than 6 small businesses and know what it's like to have to make payroll and borrow money from my kids' college fund to make that payroll, and you pay yourself last. And I know it's like to have a shingle. Currently we employ 50 people. And I oversee more than 200 volunteers within all of my organizations. I feel like I have excellent leadership skills through the military and with all of these roles. I'm very, very organized and efficient. I am a visionary. I see things. I can see the end state, and then I think very strategically. I love strategic plans, and then I love implementing them, and I love following them up and evaluating them too. So I think all of those are great assets for the position of mayor.
What do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city of Cheyenne right now? And then once you identify that biggest challenge, what are 2 or 3 other challenges that the city faces?
So to put these in order is a little bit challenging, but you know, one of the biggest issues that I've just seen is kind of a lack of a positive culture. I feel like, you know, just speaking with city staff and community members at large, that, you know, people aren't as hopeful or as positive about the community as they should be. I see, you know, I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and he agreed to move up here. His girlfriend lives here, and he's from Fort Collins, and he moved up here, and he was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it a year. He's like, it just doesn't seem like people want to do anything. It doesn't seem like people are invested in the future. And, you know, I can't believe like the lack of amenities and the lack of things to do for the younger folks in this community. And, you know, I think so that's one community perspective. And then from the city staff perspective, I think that there's some animosity. I think people are concerned about unfairness between departments, and that certain people have more workloads than other people, and maybe the public not understanding what's really going on. And so I really think just creating a more positive culture for the community is really going to be the #1 step to move forward. I definitely see some disjointing between organizations and stakeholders, and getting everyone to come together to move in one direction is going to be essential to move us into the future. So that's one of the challenges that we face, just kind of getting our house in order before we can take care of our neighbors. And then 2 or 3 of the other issues that we face, you know, we're definitely, as we've all seen and experienced, in a time of economic downfall and challenge. And I think it's really important that during these times, we don't stop building, we don't stop planning for the future. Right now, 22% of our workforce commutes in every day. And because of that, our sales tax base is way less than it could be. So recruiting and retaining our workforce so that they actually live here and expend money here is going to be essential. And then encouraging and creating the kind of place that our own community members want to expend money here instead of going to Colorado to expend funds is going to be essential to increasing our tax base as well. You know, some of the larger components of the economic development that we need to do is create more affordable housing. A lot of people can't find a place to live here, can't afford to live here. So that's a challenge that we face along with the recruitment and retention. I don't think we invest in our children appropriately. So creating a better grow your own system is going to be essential for moving forward into the future too, and economic development at large. You know, 1 out of 4 of our kids don't graduate high school in Laramie County, which is really sad. So these are the people who are going to be our professionals later in life and developers and contribute to our economy. And we need to make sure that they are successful. And then another big challenge that we face would be health, wellness, and safety. We need to be sure that our community is safe. And that means we need fast response times from the police department and fire. Our roads need to be safe, our water needs to be safe, how we dispose of our trash needs to be safe. You know, we need to feel safe and taken care of in our community. We need to have a healthy community. I don't feel like health is a priority of our community. We have one of the highest obesity rates in the nation. You know, there's a lot more that we could do for suicide prevention, and not that that's necessarily the role of the municipality, but when 1 out of 3, when every 3 days in Wyoming, one of our colleagues commits suicide, I mean, that's a problem. Those are our friends and that's our family. And as a municipality, we can say this is something that's important and this is something that we need to talk about, and this is something we need to partner with other organizations to decrease. We don't have a culture of inclusion and accessibility. Planning a party recently, with working with the city, they made a suggestion that we address some ADA compliance, which I was happy, we wanted to do, more than wanted to do. I said, well, do you have guidelines? Do you have a manual? Do you have standards? And they didn't. And I don't understand why not. If there's a mayor's council of disabilities, why wouldn't that be something that we offer with the city? We want to all accessible and inclusive community for all events and all people. And so here's some recommendations for that. So health, wellness, and safety would be another challenge that I'd like to address.
Amy, please describe your vision for Cheyenne.
I love Cheyenne. Like, it's my first boyfriend. Like, I love it so much. I moved here when I was 11 and my dad was in the Air Force. And so I moved around a lot as a child. I was born in Germany, lived in Illinois, then New Hampshire. And every time you move when you're little, you lose those memories and you lose those lifelong friends. So I moved here when I was 11, and I'm so happy that I have friends from Baggs Elementary still and Cary Junior High and East. I love the roots that we have in Wyoming and in Cheyenne. I love the values that we have here. I love that when I knocked my grocery store cart over in the parking lot in a blizzard, 3 people stopped to help me. It's just that big community feeling that we have. And my vision is to continue that, but also enhance that. I feel like we don't have enough for our families and our children. Again, I don't feel like we have that health and wellness commitment and value that we could and should. I would love to see a community that's centered around families and our citizens and offers everything that anyone would ever want here, so that the need and desire to go somewhere else and seek that is diminished.
So along those lines, what does Cheyenne not have in terms of amenities, whether it's for families, children,
Mhm.
just the community in general? What amenities does Cheyenne need, and how, as mayor, would you make that happen?
So there's different needs and wants from different demographics. So when I talk to teenagers and my son's friends and young professionals, you know, one of the things that they really want and crave is a thriving downtown and just a cool place to be. It's really essential that we revitalize our downtown and make it that hip, cool place that people just want to go and hang out for no reason other than let's go check out and see what's going on downtown. So I'm obviously very passionate about that and will continue those efforts as mayor. For families and children, we do have some things. We have a wonderful library. We have a wonderful children's village and soon Botanic Gardens, which I support wholeheartedly. The greenways are wonderful. I love the little family mountain biking park. I think that's great. The proximity to Kurt Gowdy is really nice. And I'm sure I'm missing several, you know, jumping jacks, kids can jump, and then we have some specific camps with LCCC and things like that in the summer. But overall, I do think that we need to invest more in our children and our families and education. And so having a children's museum is one great example of how we can get our kids engaged and inspired to learn and have them have a place that's safe for them to be. Expanding our greenways, expanding that little mountain bike park would be wonderful. I think a rec center would be huge. I've heard a lot of businesses that have come in, big businesses, very disappointed that we don't have a rec center. And even that gentleman I was talking about earlier, you know, he was like, I can't believe there's not even a rec center here. I just want to go play basketball. And he's in his 20s. You know, we have a lot of recreational leagues for people, for baseball or for basketball and other things, but their times are constraining and they have to go in late at night because that's when the gyms are open. So having a rec center where people can gather and play sports for all ages would be beneficial. I think it would be absolutely phenomenal if we could accomplish a convention center that was also an indoor baseball and soccer field. I think that would really help our community. That I don't know if that could be accomplished within a 4-year time frame. That's probably a 4 to 8 year project, but it's something that those discussions could start, and there could be some planning for that.
What supervisory management experience you alluded to some of it, be a little more specific if you would about your background, about your supervisory management experience, and how do you feel that would translate into the role as mayor?
Okay. So first of all, going way back, I taught in grad school at UW to undergrad nursing students. So I was responsible for certain clinical groups and certain courses. So I was the instructor for those and responsible for other people's education. Moving on to my career as a nurse practitioner, I was responsible for scheduling all of our providers for our schedule with that, and we had about 8 to 10 providers, and just making sure that was fair and equitable and gathering everybody's requests and making sure they had the hours that they needed. And then about 4 years ago, my husband and I essentially started Cheyenne Regional Urgent Care for Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. We had already owned several urgent care practices in Texas, and we own the urgent care practice in Laramie. And so the hospital knew that, and they asked us to start that practice for them. I was the day-to-day operations manager for 3 years. So I oversaw everything with the staff for scheduling, policies, procedures, and just all of the day-to-day clinic operations, customer service, evaluation, patient satisfaction, and implemented all of that. We grew very well over the course of the time, and recently have parted ways and reorganized as Stitches Acute Care Center, which is a practice my husband and I own here. And so with that, more limited involvement right now because of everything else going on, but still have some broad oversight. In the military as well, I've been responsible for large groups of people at various times and being the officer in charge. Specifically, when we deployed to the Dominican Republic, I was in charge of creating a abridged version of a combat lifesaver course and teaching it to 1,600 Caribbean soldiers over a 10-day period of time. So that involved, having the vision of what the course and objectives were, creating the plan for that, creating the team, gathering the equipment, and all of the logistics involved. Then when we deployed and were in country, we had different groups come in every day and just making sure I had my certain team, my interpreters, and doing all of the public relations for that, and then instructing all of the groups, and then doing the evaluation component for that as well. And that was a really nice challenge, and it was wonderful. I love working with people. I don't love drama, and I don't love under the table handshake deals at all. Like I have really high expectations of the people I work with. At the DDA, I work with a couple gals right now, and if you ask anyone that's ever worked for me, they'll agree that I have high expectations. But I think everything can be accomplished through positive goals, one mission, one team, just how I live my life and how I manage people.
Great. Bob, you want to take the next one? 5, 6.
Amy, you mentioned the urgent care, and you started that from the ground up. Did you have to go through the city planning and building department development for that?
Yes, especially the newest one. Yep.
And what did you think of that process? How do you think that went?
Independent of that, my husband and I have also done many other developments in the community. I think that there should be more consistency. We've often accomplished tasks that we thought were required, and then we're told after the fact that we did them incorrectly. So the timing of that was challenging. We've had inspectors come and sign things off, and then someone else comes in later and says, nope, you've got to go back and do that. And we're like, we were signed off, wait a second. That being said, I think that there are a lot of great people that work in the development office, and they really want to amend any of these perceptions, and they're working really hard to do that. I think there's a lot of room for improvement with the development office, and some of those ways that can be improved would just be when I show up as a developer, I get one person, and that one person holds my hand through the whole process. When I show up to the development office and I ask a question, everyone knows the answer, that there's a high standard for training for the people there, that I know the difference between what's a recommendation and what's a requirement. And when I do something that's a requirement, great. And if I don't, but it was just a recommendation, that I'm not penalized for not following it, just a recommendation. I think that having a better look at all of this through the eyes of multiple stakeholders, such as developers and builders and business owners, along with the public, or with the city staff, and having like an advisory board would really help create better processes. And then I think you can't communicate enough, so there needs to be a ton of communication about when there are changes, what to expect, and there needs to be a lot of buy-in, and there needs to be a lot of leeway. Just needs to be a little bit more friendly, consistent.
Well, you've expressed it very well. And I would tell you that those same thoughts have been expressed for years. So how do you make that happen? How do you get that to happen?
So again, I think I'm all about the end goal. So what's the end goal? What do we want this to look like? What are the necessary steps to get us there? Those are outlined. Who's gonna take on what step? What's the timeline? What's the deadline? And then you implement the plan. And then you evaluate the plan. You report the progress to the community.
So if you were mayor, how long do you think that would take?
A year to 2 years.
Thank you.
It's not gonna happen overnight by any means. You gotta put the team together. You gotta figure out that goal. You gotta figure out the strategic plan. You gotta get the buy-in. And then you've gotta do all of the education for the staff. And then you have to start implementing things.
So Amy had mentioned all the roles that you hold. You're one of the busiest people, professionals I know in town. So you're with the Guard, you're the director of the Children's Museum, you're the DDA director, you're a health professional, and now you're running for mayor. So if you're elected, what's your priority? And how do you avoid appearance or even any conflicts of interest with the roles that you hold?
Thank you for that question because it is one that I am asked often. So first of all, I just want to talk about my ability with time management. Again, I'm a very efficient person. I have not watched TV for 3 years at all. I don't like wasting time. I thrive on organization and getting things done. So just innately part of who I am is a really high producer. And I think unless you're a high producer yourself, you don't kind of understand how high producers operate. So I am currently a healthcare professional, family nurse practitioner, pretty limited to just my role in the military, 1 weekend a month and then my 2 weeks a year. I've been in for 14 years, and that is something I would love to finish. I have a huge duty and to my fellow soldiers and my country, and I've loved every second of the military. It's helped me become who I am today, and I would never want to not finish that commitment. So that would be something I would complete and keep going with. I would step down as the director of the DDA. The mayor actually appoints the board for the DDA, and then the DDA hires staff. My goals when I took over the DDA were to stabilize the organization, which we've done, and to create strategic plans, which we've done, and start implementing those plans, which we're doing. So, I've been able to accomplish the goals I set forth with the DDA. Succession planning is a huge part of what needs to happen when you move in and out of any organization. I don't know who the board would choose to hire as an executive director, but the program manager currently in place, Desiree Brothy, is an excellent person and natural fit to move into director should the board choose that. But I definitely would still play a role in the DDA as the mayor, though, instead of as the director. As far as the Children's Museum, this was a big decision for us on the board. And before I ran for mayor, we had a board meeting and I said, what does this look like? And does this compromise our position? And what do we all think? And the truth is, if I wasn't running for mayor, we might have the Children's Museum. But I've recognized so many things that can be improved in our community and we need a really great mayor. We really need a great mayor. And I felt like I was capable of being that great mayor. So I said, if I don't do it, we'll have a great museum, but I'm not confident we'll have a great mayor. And then nothing else in our community is going to be great either. So as a board, we decided that they were okay with me running. And my vice president, Caroline Veit, again, she's already taking over a lot of my roles as president, and so is the board, and they're all stepping up in a huge way right now. And we're working on that succession planning. I would step down from the board of the Children's Museum if I was elected, and would love to encourage their growth and progress, perhaps as an ex officio member or just a guest. But I would not be involved with the day-to-day museum processes. And as far as perceptions of what did you call it?
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. So I just, through the military, you do the right thing. You just do the right thing when no one's looking. And I would be sure I was doing the right thing. And I know that perceived conflict is, may not be reality, but sometimes perception is reality. So just being very acutely aware of that, minimizing that as much as possible, and being as honest and open and communicating with the community as much as possible would be things I would do to combat that.
Thank you.
Amy, obviously you're deeply invested in downtown, but can you talk about the future of downtown and specifically the downtown core and the West Edge? If you become mayor, where do you see the priority being? If some money comes available, is the downtown core the priority? Is the West Edge the priority? How do you see that evolving?
So it's hard to speculate, and I don't really feel like there's a fair way to choose between the two. Downtown's important. The heart of any community is with the downtown, and so we're working so hard on the revitalization of the downtown in its entirety and the momentum moving forward. So some of the essential things that need to happen: number one, we need to create that pedestrian experience. We need to have a place where people can just go and be and walk and not even be there for any reason other than because it's cool. That needs to happen in the West Edge. That needs to happen in the core. It just needs to happen in all of the places. We need to get rid of the blight downtown and the large vacant buildings that we have that are unsightly. I'm actually already working on that through an abandoned building coalition, partnered with some of the city council members, the Cheyenne Police Department, the fire department, and the DDA, and we're looking at other communities and benchmarking how other communities have been successful with eliminating blight, and how can we implement these tactics in the downtown to spill over into the rest of the community. So we're actively working on that right now, a program that we'll present to council in the city soon. That needs to happen in the core. That needs to happen in the West Edge too. Our long-term strategic plan for downtown has 4 components. One is that it is a wonderful sense of place. You know that you're downtown just because you're there. Number 2, that it's a residential community, that people live downtown, and that includes everything like a grocery store, affordable housing. Number 3, that it's a destination, that people get off the interstate to come downtown. And that's, again, why things like the museum or another attraction are so important. We need people to come off the interstate and come downtown. We're actually working on, the murals have been really great for that. And now one of the things that we're going to start is a military mural painted by a military member. And we think that might bring people off the interstate to come check out the military mural. So just things like that, we need to focus on that. And then the fourth thing is we need a friendly place for developers and retailers where it's not difficult to pop up your business or to redevelop one of these large vacant buildings, and there's an actual return on investment. So those are the long-term 4-year or 15-year visions for the downtown, and they're all inclusive. And I work actively on the core right now with the core group, but I also actively work on West Edge with the city. And I don't think we have to choose between the two. I think that they're cohesive, and I think we need to find a way to accomplish both.
Agree.
We obviously know you're in favor of the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum, but can you explain why that's important?
So I think it's the important piece here is just the public process. I think that the public, as outlined by state statute, should have the right to choose what they want to support in their community. And in economic downfall like this and just really difficult times, it's a tool in the toolbox that we haven't tried to use in Laramie County ever. And it's a way to keep moving forward. It's a way to express what we value as a community. Do we value amenities, and do we value our families, and do we value our kids, or don't we? And it's a question that we're going to ask the community. We're not shoving it down anybody's throat. The process with the Children's Museum and the tax has been completely organic. We started 3 years ago as a children's museum and have done just a ton of work. We've taken it really far. And so we're continuing that organic process through a petition, to even ask the question to the voters. And if they want to tax themselves and they want to support a community with amenities who is pro-children, pro-families, pro-education, pro-culture and events, because the third floor is a 300 to 400 seat theater, then they'll vote yes and they'll pass it. And if they don't want to, then they'll vote no. And I love that process. I love that when there are 6 penny items, I get to say what I value and I believe in, and I get to vote yes and no. I think that operations, basic infrastructure operations, we're already funding that with 5th penny, and now it's creeped over into 6th penny. As a taxpayer, I would have a hard time voting yes on 7th penny items for basic infrastructure that needs to be accomplished with 5th and 6th pennies. I think those items, the focus should be increasing that tax base through amenities. And so to me, it's cyclical and it all is intertwined. If the community doesn't want to tax themselves, I get it, but I think it's up to the people in Laramie County to decide.
So the petition, just to clarify, the petition is to get the 7th penny on the November ballot. Is
to
that
get the quarter-cent
quarter cent, right?
economic
So,
development
yeah,
sales
quarter
tax.
of 7th penny
Yep, on the ballot.
on the November ballot.
Mhm.
If that's not successful and it becomes a 6th penny question, are you still in favor of that and putting it on? There's possibility of adding it on to the 100 million that the county commissioners are talking about in May. Is that clearly you want the partial 7th penny, but is that a direction you'd like to see happen?
So again, like to say that it's a possibility to add it onto the 6th penny in May is speculatory. We have nothing that guaranteed or in writing or that's even going to be possible.
Sure.
So our priority is to be able to ask the community if they want to help fund this or not. That's our priority. And we feel like the best chance of success with that priority is through the petition process in the November election. We'll have definitely a larger voter turnout, and it's just the process and the plan that we've set and we're implementing at this point.
Okay. Related to that, then the 6th penny. So if, as you sit here today, what would be your priorities for the city's portion of the 6th penny ballot next May? What projects, what initiatives do you think should be on that 6th penny ballot?
There were certainly a lot of items in the community improvement plan, weren't there? I don't know, because the public hasn't really, I don't think, been invited to the process yet. So it would be really nice to have a process in place where, it's a year away, but I feel like the process should have started several years ago, and the public should have had a much larger role in saying what they had hoped to be on there. I know the items that the directors have suggested, but I haven't heard the feedback from the council yet. There's so many items, I think there should probably be some kind of a balance between amenities and what's going to recruit and retain our professionals and our infrastructure needs, and making sure that we have adequate staff and adequate training and facilities to accomplish those goals. So I'd really have to take a much closer look at all of the options. And I would love the opportunity to be involved in that discussion. I don't know if that will happen or not, but.
How do you feel about development of the Belmore Ranch and providing access, recreational access to the ranch. Where would that fit in your list of priorities for city funding?
I absolutely love mountain biking and hiking. I went out a few weeks ago and had a nice crash on my bike at Kirk Gowdy. It would be wonderful to have another site for that. It would be wonderful if it could draw people from even Colorado up to use our site and then direct them into Cheyenne to spend some money here. That being said, there are some safety concerns, and just how are we going to ensure that it's a safe site, especially with all of the large debris before we open it up. I think, answering those questions is really important, but I would support some allocation of funding for the Belleville Ranch if those questions could be answered appropriately.
Where might you find the money to do that?
I think, maybe on the sixth penny.
Okay.
I also think, we have a pretty healthy reserve. It's taken a little hit at the end of the budget year this year, but we're well above the required reserve amount, and I think it's important to not leave dollars on the table, if you will, and make sure we're using that money as an investment and investing in our community and investing in ways such as that or other economic development so that we can in turn increase our sales tax base and save more money.
Dovetails right into the question about budget and savings priorities. As mayor, what would be your priorities for how the city spends its money, and how much savings do you think should be added to that reserve each year?
So there's a ordinance or resolution that states that there's a certain amount of per month, like 3 months, that you have to keep in reserve, and I believe that's around $8 million, and we have about $12 to $13 million. So unless the council and electeds felt like there should be more reserve than that, I don't think there's a huge need to keep a ton of money sitting there. I think saving money, but then intentionally distributing those funds for things that develop our community is important. I think with public taxpayer dollars, it's essential to be efficient, and it's essential to make sure you're not wasting money. As a business owner, you don't waste money. You just don't. And I know that there's a big difference between a private business and a municipality, but you just got to make sure things are streamlined, that people are doing the work that they need to do and they're not wasting time, that they're being efficient, that you have the right people doing the right jobs, that when you're not overstaffed, overstaffing can be a huge concern and can really deplete most of your operational budget. So just taking a really close look at staffing and is it appropriate? You also want to make sure you're not burning your people out and that they have what they need. So there's a lot with the budget that needs to be looked at. I think it needs a really close look within each department to make sure it's all being ran efficiently with staffing and with spending as well, and that we are saving reserves, but also intentionally investing those reserves.
Amy, do you support the $312,000 that was taken out of reserves for the 2.5% pay raise?
I don't think reserves should be used for operational expenses. So I feel like that ask was maybe a little bit late in the game, and I wish that the ask would have been made earlier on in the budget process. I wish that the budget process was a little more open to the public to begin with, and that all of these discussions could happen at the beginning so that the final approval, there aren't any surprises like that. I think that, do I support a pay raise for staff? Sure. I don't think the staff are paid enough. They're under market value. But I think that they should have taken a harder look at the budget in its entirety and accomplished those pay raises out of the budget, not out of reserve.
Okay. So you've expressed the support for the staff. You also just said that we should watch out for overstaffing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were mayor, how would you open up that budget process so that it was more transparent? How would you incorporate the departments and the citizen review type of process, if I'm understanding.
Yep. I would not be opposed at all to even a monthly or a quarterly roundtable discussion where anyone could come in and say, have you thought about this way to spend funds, or have you thought about this way to save money? So that it's just an ongoing discussion within the community to whoever wants a seat at that table. I think that's essential. I also think having one department person come in with all of the council and the mayor on the kind of a one-on-one discussion setting, annually or every 2 years to say, or I'm sorry, annually for the annual budget to say, this is what we're doing, and then the city council could ask questions and they could have that conversation. I think having that open to the public is great too. But I think all of these conversations need to happen like in January and February, well before the budget is finalized. As far as making sure staff is adequate and also not being afraid I'm not afraid to reduce staff. I believe in attrition. I don't like firing people, right? And I think when we lose staff, we disperse duties to the right people, and then we take that payroll and we increase the pay of the people taking on extra workloads with a portion of it, and then we take a portion of it and put it back into the budget. So I think we have to figure out a way long-term and strategically, how are we going to increase the city staff to where they're market valued so that we have wonderful people in those positions, because we have to have wonderful people in those positions who are experienced, who are strategic, who know how to do things. Otherwise, we all lose. So the only way to do that is we have to create a work environment where they want to be there because they love the culture. It's positive, it's flexible. And we have to pay them. We have to pay them enough to where they want to be here, And so how are we going to accomplish that? A 2.5% Band-Aid is probably not going to get us there, right? So we need to think about where do we want to get them, and then how are we going to get them there, and then we implement it. And that's kind of how you just do life.
One more question related to that before we move on, Amy, and that's that the city spent some money on a salary study a few years ago that, as far as we know, has sat on the shelf and not been used. We don't know to what extent city staff may have referred to it as they're putting budgets together, or the mayor, but the effort that was planned has been stymied because they wanted to hold those meetings behind closed doors,
Right.
and we challenged that. What would be your plan for using that study, or do you think that study is outdated by now? How important would using that be to analyze where staff salaries are at right now?
It's a 2013 study, I believe. Yeah. I kind of saw it on someone's desk, but didn't get to look at it. I think it's probably outdated at this point. It would be a nice baseline to glance at, and it would be interesting information to see what the suggestions were at that point, and have we even gotten to there yet? But I mean, likely it needs to be updated.
Amy, how do you feel about the possibility of an anti-discrimination ordinance passed by the city council? Is that something that is needed, and would you encourage it to be passed?
I do not like discrimination of any kind, ever. I think that the military, for example, has done an excellent job of incorporating anti-discrimination rules within our organization. In my last class that I had for several weeks, my roommate was a lesbian, and I absolutely support all lifestyles. I don't support the current ordinance as written, as there are criminal charges within that. And, I am not sure if another ordinance would be something I would support or not. I'd have to see it, see the language and see what the intent was.
Do you think that's something that should be done at the state level rather than the city, or do you think it's fine for the city to pass something as long as it's what you would agree with?
I think it needs to be something at the federal level. I think it needs to be a protected class, and that should happen at the federal level. I really hate to see municipalities get involved in issues that aren't municipality related.
landfill expansion and development, it appears that things are moving toward expansion of the Happy Jack landfill. And part of what's been discussed is the recent increases the last couple of years in the sanitation fees. There was an expectation that that was going to help fund that. Where are you at with the landfill expansion as it's going forward now? Do you have feelings that it ought to be going a different direction, and how to pay for all of it?
I support the landfill expansion at this point. I believe it'll get us about 30 to 35 more years of landfill usage. I think strategically we need to figure out how we're going to make less trash, and that's a much bigger emphasis on in our community on recycling and recycling programs and making it easier for people to dispose of electronics and paint and having community pickup days and those such areas. I think as a nation and a world that we need to figure out how we're going to make less trash. I think the landfill expansion gives us a little bit of time to figure out what that's going to look like in the future.
Amy, you talked earlier about your vision for the community and how we should continue to invest in the community and that we can continue to raise revenues by that investment. So I'm going to ask for a hypothetical situation the other way. The economy doesn't do well, and our budget is really crunched. So would you favor, have you prioritized in your own mind the essential government services, the secondary services, third services? Would you cut like 10% across the board? Would you try to do it by department? How would you handle a restriction in the budget?
Mm-hmm. So I do think there's a few different ways to look at that. And number one, the role of the government is to make sure we're safe. Number one. And so we need to make sure that we're safe. And again, that we have good response times, that our water's safe, our disposal of trash is safe, our roads are safe, our infrastructure is safe. I think you have to keep that in mind as you're having these budget discussions. I was actually involved with a really large budget reduction. We had a negative $12 million annual loss, and we turned that around to a positive $18 million in 1 year. We did do that by across the board percent budget reductions, and we did it with teams. We brought in different teams from different departments, and we all sat at a table for about 4 months, and we looked at each other's budgets, and we brainstormed with each other and said, do you really need that job? Do you really need that service? Do you really need this? How can we help each other out? And it was really effective. I think that however the budget reduction happens, there just needs to be a process that there's buy-in for that process. You implement that process, and then you don't change mid-course. And you need to keep the goals of the community in mind, and what is the role of the municipality really? What does it really boil down to? And that needs to be at the forefront of everyone's minds while the budget reductions are happening. I think you can run effective organizations with less. I've done it personally in our businesses. When you, as a private business owner, when you don't have the money, you figure out a way to reduce costs, period. Or you should close your doors, and so you got to figure it out. Sometimes it's hard, but you got to figure it out.
With that turnaround from the negative 12 million to positive, where was that, and how did that transpire?
It was a private
organization.
organization. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know if they would love me
That's fine. That's
saying
fine.
that.
I don't need to be specific, it's just, but it wasn't a government entity.
No, it was a private.
But you suggested there are quite a few parallels. I mean, some people become elected officials or get into government and kind of lose sight of the fact that a government can run like a business and have those efficiencies. But at the same time, elected officials face re-election and all that. Maybe they don't tend to do that. How do you step into those kind of situations as an elected official and say, now we're going to look at the city from a business perspective? And easy to do, or is that difficult?
No, it's really challenging. I don't think you can run a public organization like a small business on all levels. I think there's definitely factors that you can take into it and lessons that you've learned and bring those across the board. But the truth is that there are regulations and there are stiff things that have to happen for public organizations that often make it difficult or impossible if you ran a private business that way. Like, and then that's, you know, one of the reasons that we just came to a head with our business was because there's just certain things you have to do publicly that don't work privately, and vice versa. And so I do think the biggest thing that you can do with a public organization is represent the public. You communicate with the public, you have public buy-in, the public knows that you're acting in their best interests. And how do they know that? You open your doors, you open your meetings, you communicate with the public regularly about those things. The public sector takes a lot more time to implement or do anything ever than the private sector. And I see that in the military, and I see that, you know, with the DDA, and then my dealings with the city for other things. It just is a much slower process that makes it really painful for private folk. But I think you just open your mind to that, and you understand that, and you work with it with the tools that you have as best you can.
I'd like to follow up on that. You've mentioned just throughout our discussion about your successes have been really based on communication and collaboration. Some have said that the city, the departments operate in silos. You have the BOP on a totally different street, and you have these divisions and different floors and different offices. How do you bring that collaboration as mayor to that culture? And how will you change that culture?
So it's going back to the military, you have a mission. You have a mission, and it's one mission, and the team is there for the mission. And that's how we operate our businesses and other organizations I'm a part of. You know, what's our mission? How do we get there together? And the rest of it is noise, and the rest of it you have to be able to filter out all the nonsense, basically. So I think having people at the same table talking is one of the very best things that you can do. Having weekly reports to departments and council and even the city and the public, you know, I think would be great. Having those reports easily accessible on the website, having like an easy to manage website where people can go there and see what's going on would be a great tool for communication too. Opening your doors and having the roundtable discussions regularly to whoever wants to participate is also a great option. But I do agree that a lot of the community operates in silos. And I do think that's why we haven't progressed as much as we could have at this point. And breaking down those silos is important. But you have to have everyone willing to go there. Like, they all have to be willing to break down those silos together. And you know, sometimes you just got to get on the same team. And if you can't be on that team, maybe you go to a different team. You know, it's kind of that important.
Thank you.
There's some fifth penny money and also some general fund money that goes to the United Way to distribute to a series of nonprofits. Do you have thoughts on that?
I do have thoughts on that. I didn't know about that until several months ago, and I've been in this community since 1985. I think that's a good example of the public not being communicated with enough. As a part of a nonprofit, I think that there should be equity in distributing of funds. If the city is going to do anything, there needs to be equity, whether it's development or distributions of funds to nonprofit or whatever. It needs to be fair. So if the city's going to distribute funds to nonprofits for any certain reasons, there needs to be a process in place for that the public's very aware of, so that everyone has the opportunity to apply for those funds. It's the role of the government is not to pick winners and losers. And so I don't know what that process would look like for it to be fair and equitable, but everyone should have the opportunity. And if it's simply the United Way is the authority on that, like I would have liked to have known that as part of the public sector.
Any other questions? Well, Amy, are there other things that you would like to address with us that we haven't talked about in our conversation today?
I really appreciate the opportunity. Sharing is really scary, but no, I'm just kidding, Sharon. You guys were really kind. Thank you. I guess my whole thing with this is let's really get a great mayor. Like, let's have a positive culture. Let's have a positive community. Let's make sure we move forward. This opportunity may not come again for 4 to 8 years. And so let's select people who are going to be fair, predictable, consistent, who are not status quo, who can think flexibly, who can be creative, who can create the atmosphere and the environment for our city staff so that they can thrive. Like, let's just make sure we really get this right this time. And I really appreciate the conversation and the dialogue and the opportunity to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.